Hello again. We're going to continue our discussion of CSS, and today we're going to start delving into animation and some other features of CSS. I'm using the microphone today, so hopefully the audio is better quality. So I'm going to start today with just a blank HTML document, and I have it open over here. But before we get started, let's take a look at where we want to go. So it's going to take a little while to get here, but the idea here is I want to make a custom checkbox, right? So here is, actually let me Google CSS checkbox, right? So I'm going to look this up, right? And W3 Schools has a website here that kind of has a good example. This is the default checkbox, right? So that's what a default checkbox looks like, and the radio button looks like this. So these are not very exciting, right? They're awfully small too. So at the regular size, they're this big, which is really pretty small. These are custom checkboxes. So the thing is, you can't style this, right? So just get that out of your head. You can't make this look like this, but they're kind of doing it, right? What do they do, right? So you can't actually style the input that is the check here, but you can style the label, right? So really what's happening here is they're styling the label and they're hiding the input, okay? So where we want to go with this is we want to make some custom checkboxes. So there's a whole story about it here. They call it the checkbox hack and things you can do with it, right? And so here's like a sample checkbox right here. You can click on it and it changes the emoji. Here's some custom checkboxes, right? You can see there's a little bit of animation there, right? There's I have another link here to a bunch of custom checkboxes. So this is a custom checkbox here, right? That's kind of a nice one. These are kind of understated, but kind of nice, kind of plain, right? So those are working pretty good. Let's scroll down. What kind of other things do people do? Oh, that's kind of cool, right? Nice. The jelly checkbox. Oh, that one's got like kind of a nice little animation jiggle to it, right? This is kind of okay there, right? Nothing wrong with this. Let's see. That's kind of nice, right? Kind of interesting. Now, you wouldn't want to use these everywhere, right? For some websites, this would be just the perfect thing. And on other websites, it might, with other design, this might look a little excessive, right? And so here's some more, right? So essentially, in all of these cases, they're using some CSS to hide the real input, and then they're using another element because we could easily use a div or some element to style in this way, right? But you can't change the look of the default checkbox. So you can't actually change that, okay? Or at least not right now when I made this video, right? Maybe in the future, right? Oh, these are kind of nice, right? Let's see what else do we got here. Here's a whole bunch more. Got the flip, right? So anyway, so that gives you an idea. Like, this is where we want to go, okay? So before we can get there, though, we got to go through a couple things. We got to learn a little more about CSS, right? So I'm going to go back to my HTML document here, and I'm going to make a box. So I've got a div here with class box, okay? And that's where I'm going to start. And what I'd like to do is make this box look like something. So I'm going to start with width of 100 pixels and a height of 100 pixels, okay? And then I'll give it a border. I'm going to just do all the styles on border here. So I'll say solid 1 pixel. And now we can see the box, right? There it is. And now what I'd like to do is I'd like to, let's imagine this is going to be our checkbox, right? And we want to have some animation in here, right? So I need to draw an X in here. Now you could use an icon, but or an image file of some kind. I'm going to use CSS though, right? So in order for me to do that, what I need is another element here, like let's say another div. Okay, so it has to be a block level element so I can set the width and the height, right? So if I put another div in here, then I can say box child div, and I can give this a width of 80 pixels maybe, and a height of 10 pixels, and a background color of black. Okay, so there I see my my box, my small box, right? But maybe I want to move it to the center, right? So there's a few ways to do this. I'm going to go to box up here and say display flex, right? And you could use flex for this. We're going to actually not use flex though, but for right now I'll just use it, right? So we can say justify content center. You'll see why in a moment, right? So I can say align items center, and it's in the middle, right? Let me zoom in on this, right? So that's pretty good. Now maybe I want to rotate it because I want to create an X, right? So what I'll do is I'll say down here, I'll say transform rotate. Okay, so this is a new property, transform, and it has a few functions that you can attach to it. So there's translate, rotate, skew, and can't remember. There's probably another one, but rotate obviously rotates, right? So, and rotation, like any other value, takes a unit, and with rotation, one of the units is degrees. You can also do radians, okay? I'm gonna rotate in degrees because that's easy to understand, and I'll rotate 45 degrees. So now I have a 45-degree rotation there, right? Okay, so if I had two of these divs, then I could make one negative 45 degrees, and I'd have my checkbox, right? Or a box with an X in it, right? So so that's one way to handle this, right? But what if, like, let's say I'm going to ask people to use this on their websites. Like I want them to use this checkbox. And then when I tell them to use the checkbox, I have to say, like, hey, you have to create a div, give it a class name, and then make two empty divs inside, or the checkbox doesn't work. Like, that's hard for people to grok, right? It'd be easier if you just made a div and called it checkbox or something, right? And then it just showed up with the X inside it, right? So how can we do that, right? What if I do this? What if I take out the div, okay, and I just make this empty? So this is an empty box right here. Okay, so the first step to doing some of these advanced examples like we saw with those fancy checkboxes and things is this idea of adding some elements to another element. Okay, and you can do that with a pseudo property called before and after. I'm going to use after right now. So when I say colon after, what the computer's going to do is it's going to make a brand new element, and I'm going to go to, or what the browser is going to do here, I'm going to go to the inspector here and inspect this this box, right? So there's my div box, right? And I don't see anything yet, right? But wait, I'm going to go in here now with the after property and say content. Oops, I said counter reset. I want to do content content equals, and then I'm going to just put the empty quotes there, right? So when I do this, you can see now when I look in the inspector that this can be opened, and we can see that it has an after element. So this is called a pseudo element, so it doesn't actually exist in the markup, but the CSS is adding a new element to the markup, right? And you'll notice my line is back, right? So I don't have an extra div here. What I did is I created a pseudo div, like a Android div, a ghost div, right? I created it here, and you could give it some content too. You could say, hello or whatever. You put some text in there, and then you'd see hello on there, right? Okay. So this is used to create elements with CSS. So you would only use this really for, a situation where the content that you were adding was not part of the page content, but it was part of the design, right? So you're adding content to the page that's part of the design, right? It's not part of the actual like information that is part of the page content, right? So keep in mind when you do this. So you don't want to add stuff that is core to the page, right? That's really important. You just want to add stuff that's going to enhance the design, and then this doesn't force you to also add more markup. Now there are some limitations. There's also an after. So if I take the box and I change this, or I said after, and there's also a before, right? Maybe it would make more sense if I took the before and put it before the after like that, right? So you got before and then you got after, right? And on the before one right here, or maybe on the after one, I'll make it negative 45 degrees. So now I have two of these, right? So this is where this looks a little strange, right? But I'm trying to put them both in the middle. My problem is this is where display flex is causing us some trouble, right? Because now there's two children, and so it's dividing them equally in space across, right? So we can't actually use display flex for this, though this was probably the easiest way to put something in the center, right? So I'm going to get rid of that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to set the box right here to position relative. Okay, so we're going to do position relative here, and then down here I'm going to make these guys all position absolute, like this, right? So there's my 1x, and then I'll make the after one will be position absolute, and now I just have the job of putting the x in the center, right? So we can also do that with transform. So we could use left and top, but for these examples, I'm going to use the transform property, and I'm going to focus on this because this is a new property that you can learn, and it has a lot of great possibilities. So transform also has a translate property. So translate lets you move something, okay? And you can move it on the X and Y. And when you use this with rotate, you can't make a new transform like this, right? Because it will only get one of them. So if I do it this way, it doesn't work, right? Or I mean, it'll kind of work, but like if I say translate and then I want to put this in the middle, so let's put it at, what would it be, like 50 pixels, right? And then 50 pixels, maybe that's too much, right? That with the left edge in the middle, I got to go back. I'm 80 pixels, so I got to subtract half the width here. So I got to subtract 40. I got to go 10 pixels to the left, and I'm 10 tall, so I got to subtract 5 here. So this is going to be 45, right? So that put the box in the center, but it overwrote the rotation. So there's no, and just to make sure we're looking at the right one, we'll make that one red, right? So you can see I applied the rotation and then I overwrote this property when I set translate or transform down here, right? So when you use transform, all your transformations go on the same line, okay? So let's get rid of transform, the first one, right? And we'll use the second one, and I have to zoom out a little bit there. And then I'm going to put the rotation here, right? So that looks correct. So the other thing you have to understand about transform is all the transformations that you use here, they're applied to the element in the order that they appear on this line. So that means that if I move the box to the center and then rotate it, it'll be in the center and then turned, right? If I rotate it first, I gotta get rid of that semicolon there, put it back on the end. So if I move it first, I'm gonna get a different look, right? So what happened here is I rotated 45 degrees and then I translated from that 45 degrees. So it was up at the top here, turned 45 degrees, and then moved at an angle along that 45 degree angle down and to the left, okay? So the order that you use these matters. Okay, so I want to translate first and rotate later. So this works best for me here. And then, I can borrow this and we'll apply it down here at the bottom, right? So I'm going to make this one negative 45 degrees. Oh wait, I did negative 45 pixels. I want to do negative 45 degrees here. There we go. So now I have the two X's. So the red one is the first one and the black one is the second one. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So my challenge to you right now is to design two things, right? So design a checkbox, give it a class name. We're going to combine this with your CSS framework, right? But for right now, just design just the checkbox, okay? So get this, make a class name for something that can be the checkbox, right? It can be a div, right? Give it a class name, and then you design it. And so, you could put rounded corners on here. You can set the color. You can do a rounded corner here. You can set the border. You could put a background color in the box. Just think of the properties that you have at your disposal and what you can do with them, right? There is a limitation though, okay? You can only have one before element and one after element. And to my knowledge, you can't stack them. So you can't say after like this. You can't put an after element on top of another after element, okay? Maybe in the future, but right now, if to my knowledge, you can only have one before and one after. So that means we can have two elements that we can work with, right? So that's kind of a limitation, but it could also be, interesting. Maybe there's like some creative ideas that it will spawn. So anyway, I'll leave that for you to think about. Your challenge is to design a checkbox. It could be just something simple. You just do the color, right? Maybe adjust some of the width and the height and the size of everything, right? Okay. But then if you get creative, let your creative ideas wander and do whatever you think is best there. Okay. So anyway, thanks for watching, and then we'll continue in the next video.